So we have a short presentation on the 6th chapter of Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining the various incarnations and the various vilasa and various forms of the Lord. So what we can understand is there are three basic fundamentals we have to understand, otherwise we'll get confused here. So probably I'm wrong here. I don't know exactly if this is right. This is my study notes. So I might change this video later on. So as per the basic structure is, the Lord has first the Swayam Rupa form. This is the Swayam Rupa form, and that's a very basic structural form where Krishna is thinking himself to be the cowherd boy Vrindavan. So that's, he never takes a one step outside Vrindavan. Swayam Rupa. The next step is the Prakasha forms. The Prakasha forms are almost like Swayam Rupa forms, but they're the first expansions. Prakashas are expansions from the original. So out of this, the first Prakasha expansion may be Swayam Prakasha also. Swayam Prakasha is Krishna himself actually, and he's dancing with the gopis, and he's expanding himself into many forms. So that kind of an expansion, you can't even call it an expansion. You can just call it like kind of his own like basically changing his form into multiple forms. That is Swayam Prakasha. Another is Vaibhav Prakasha. Vaibhav Prakasha is Lord Balaram. When he wants to interact with one of his own forms, generally he doesn't interact with his own forms, but if he has some kind of an interaction where he wants to interact with his own forms, so he, or maybe not also that, like sometimes the whole idea is Prakasha, Vaibhav Prakasha is nothing but two-handed expansions. That's what it is. So Balramji, here Balramji has come in a form in which Krishna can interact with Balramji and he can talk with Balramji and stuff like that, although he's the same person. So that Vaibhav is a two-handed and Prakasha is the first expansion basically. Also when Krishna takes the form of the baby in the jail, so that form, four-handed form is, you can call Prabhav Prakash, and the two-handed form is Vaibhav Prakash again. So Prakash is the first expansion basically. So may or may not be wanting to interact. So as a baby he didn't have to interact with any of his own other forms. But anyway, that was one of the first expansions, you can say, of Krishna. Basically, that's what he was actually doing. So in that is known as the Prakasha. So the Prakasha is the first level of expansion. So now if you understand, Vaibhava is two-handed and Prabhava is four-handed. Swamsha is basically related to the location, that is material world, and Vilasa is represented to the location of spiritual world. So Vilasa expansions are mostly into the Vaikunta expansions, the spiritual ones. Swamsha expansions are basically related to the material world. Now everything will get mixed later on. So let's just understand. So basically, if you see the first expansion from the point of view of percentage, like say we say 92% is Vishnu and 100% is Krishna. In terms of percentage wise, you can say Swayam Rupa is the 100% thing. Then there is Vaibhav Prakasha and Swayam Prakasha and then Vaibhav Prakasha. And from the Vaibhav Prakasha, you can say, comes the Tad Ekatma Rupa. So ultimately Lord Balaram only expands. So Tad Ekatma Rupa has a lesser percentage. It is around 93%. It's mostly Vishnu forms, Tad Ekatma Rupa. And maybe even more than 93%. Sometimes Dwarka forms are also there in that. So Tad Ekatma Rupa is there. And so in terms of its percentage wise, the three divisions can be Swayam Rupa, Prakashas and Tad Ekatmas. Basically, the Prakashas are the first layer, the first expansions, and the Tadekatmas are the second layer of expansions, and then comes the Shakti Aveshas. The Shakti Aveshas are Jiva entities, living entities, or Krishna's lower forms, which are empowered by the higher forms. So it's Shakti Avesha. Like the Supreme Lord Balaram can empower his special Shakti to Ananta Shesha. So in terms of Ananta Shesha is also expansion of Balaram only, but he's one of the basically later on Leela expansions of Lord Balaram, but he's empowered also by Balaram. So he's Krishna himself who's empowered by Krishna himself. Very funny, but that happens like that. So that is Shakti Avisha form in which Lord himself is empowered, and Jivatmas like Narada Muni and the four Kumaras and so all these people are also like the four Kumaras, Narada, Prithu Maharaj, and a few others. They are empowered by the Lord, like Brahma also. They are empowered to do certain things, and this Shakti of getting empowered by them, like Narada is empowered by devotional Shakti of the Lord, and there are certain Shaktis, and Kumaras by the knowledge Shakti potency of the Lord and things like that. So So they are empowered incarnations. So qualitative wise, if you see that Swayam Rupa, Prakashas and Tad Ekatma Rupas. So these are the, and basically our the Shakti Aveshas. These are the four categories. In terms of hands, we can see Prabhava and Vaibhava. In terms of locations, we can see Swamsha and Vilasa. And then in terms of many other things also, then there is Leela avatars, Guna avatars, and so many other terms also which are used, which are all mixing, everything will be mixed together actually. So let us go from the first expansion, that is Swayam Rupa. So that is the first expansion. Then is the Prakasha expansions of the Lord. So if you see here, the 400 small little baby was also Prakasha expansion of Lord. And initially was Prabhava Prakasha. So as we've seen, Prabhava means 400, Vaibhava means 200. So initially he was a 400 baby, so he was a Prabhava Prakasha, and then he became a Vaibhava Prakasha. You can say like that. And this 400 form of the baby was Balaji, Lord Tirupati Balaji. I heard some devotee say that actually this baby form was Balaji form of Lord Tirupati. So Tirupati Balaji is more of a very, very close kind of a Krishna's first expansion. It is like not one of those later expansions. That's why he has very much characteristics of Krishna himself. Like he's like a Bal Gopal kind of a characteristics is there with Balaji. So that's why, because he's a Vaibhav Prakasha or something like a Prabhav Prakasha mostly, not because he doesn't have two hands. He has, sometimes for Leela he used to come with two hands also. When he came down on earth, Tirupati Balaji, he was coming in two hands also. And he was performing the pastimes of little boy like that. So there is sometimes he is Vaibhav Prakash, sometimes Prabhav Prakash, just like Lord Balramji. He is the first Prakasha incarnation. So that's why Balaji is also very special. He's like Swayam Prakasha kind of personality. Not Swayam Prakasha, definitely not Swayam Prakasha. He's Vaibhav Prakasha or Prabhav Prakasha, Balaji. So from Swayam Rupa is the first expansion, then is the Prakasha expansion. From Prakasha expansion, because Balram is the source, Tadekatma Rupas come into picture. So Tadekatma Rupas are slightly different. They are slightly 93% of Krishna, kind of slightly different versions of Krishna. The Vishnu forms. So in that there is Swamsha and Vilasa. Swamsha is specifically in relation to the creation of the material world, and Vilasa are eternal Vaikuntha planets. So in the Vilasa expansion there is 400 and 200. Prabhava Vilasa, Vaibhava Vilasa. Prabhupada explains Prabhava Vilasa in detail, whereas Vaibhava Vilasa is just touches upon the subject matter. Vaibhava Vilasa are 200 forms like Dwarka, spiritual Ayodhya, maybe 200 forms are there in Vaibhava Vilasa. In Prabhava Vilasa there are all 400 forms. And in Prabhava Vilasa, we'll go in detail a little bit. So let's go to the next part. So in Prabhava Vilasa, if you see the 400 forms, they come as Narayana. Originally, Prabhava Vilasa comes as Lord Narayana. This happens in Vaikuntha. There are different Vaikuntha planets. So inside Narayana expands as Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. And then Vasudeva has these four expansions. Krishna, Keshava, Narayana, Madhava, Govinda. And then Pradyumna has Govinda, Vishnu, Madhusudana. And then Aniruddha has Rishikesha, Vamana, Sridhara, and has Rishikesha, Padmanabha, Damodara, and our Pradyumna has Trivikrama, Vamana, Sridhara, and Sankarsana has Govinda, Vishnu, and Madhusudana, and Vasudeva has Keshava, Narayana, and Madhava. So these are the months also, these 12 months, you can say the 12 parts of the body that you have. So totally there are 16 because if you add 4 to this Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and then all the different categorizations, you will get 16. And then there is Vilasa Murti expansions, which are slightly different expansions in the spiritual world only. So then there's Upendra, Achyuta, Amrisha, Purushottama, and again Vasudeva expands as Vilasa Murti expansions. He expands into these forms. So there are 4 more forms, 24 forms are there. This is the spiritual world, sum and substance of Vaikunthas and spiritual worlds other than Golok Vrindavan. So Golok Vrindavan is Swayam Rupa. So we have covered the Vilasa forms. Then we will go to Swa-amsha forms. What is the Swa-amsha? Personal expansions in terms of creation of the material world. So let's go to the third page. When you see Swamsha, there are 2 divisions. One is Sankarshana division, Incarnation division, basically. So if you see Swamsha, it is basically in relation to the material creation of the material world. So how does the material world get created? From Sankarshana comes Karanadokshayi Vishnu, Garbhodokshayi Vishnu, Kshirodokshayi Vishnu, which are also known as Purusha avatars. And from the Purusha avatars, there is from Kshirodokshayi Vishnu, again there are many other different kind of incarnations. Not only do these Shirodaksha Vishnu form different kind of incarnation, but also from the Vilasa Rups, as we described the spiritual world from the Vilasa, from there also people come down, just like Narsimha Dev comes from his Narsimha planet, or sometimes he comes from certain planets only. So they have their own planets. So sometimes they descend directly from the planet. Sometimes the Shirodaksha Vishnu transforms into another incarnation. So after mixing all of these Purusha avatars, the people who have descended from their planets, so we can make another categorization in the material world. The categorization goes like this. It is known as Leela avatars, which are particularly come to do Leelas. There is Purusha avatars, which are come to create the universe. There is Guna avatars, which are used to maintain the universe, like Lord Shiva, who's an expansion from Sankarshana, basically, Guna avatar. And there is Manava Antara, again, one of the, which he comes for every Manu, he comes. And there is Yuga avatars, which are come every Yuga. So who are these people? They may be Vilasa from the spiritual world. They may be from Shirodaksha Vishnu, one of the two people. And they may be original Krishna also. He also enters through this path only. Like when he is Swayam Rupa Krishna, when he once in a day of Brahma, when he wants to come, he will be categorized as a Leela avatar at that point. Although he's also he's a Yuga avatar at that point. Yuge, Sambhavami Yuge. But he doesn't mention that once in a day of Brahma I come. But he does mention that Yuga comes once in a day of Brahma. He doesn't mention that. So he also comes as, so in this there could be Prakasha, Vaibhav Prakasha also may come here, because Balramji comes as Leela avatar, and so many things, all these things are, so this categorization is totally different categorization from the other. So we have seen categorization that are happening in different levels. One is the percentage wise categorization. In that Swayam Rupa is there, Prakasha is there, then Tadek Atma Rupa is there, then Sakti Avesha is there. From that, and then second categorization from the hands. The two-handed forms are generally Vaibhava forms, and four-handed forms are Prabhava forms. So mostly, if you see Prabhava forms will not be there in Golok Vrindavan, but sometimes maybe when Krishna wants to play with when he wants to cheat the gopis, then he takes the form of Narayan just to do that, and certain times he takes the form also. So in that case only in Golok Vrindavan Lord Narayan may manifest at certain points. So other than that, Golok Vrindavan such Prabhava forms don't manifest, only Vaibhava forms, and especially Vaibhava means Swayam Rupa. Ultimately Krishna is always there in Swayam Rupa or Swayam Prakasha sometimes, like Ras Leela, and Vaibhava Prakasha like Balramji. So that is how Golok Vrindavan. So the categorization happens like this. First is qualitative categorization. Qualitative categorization is like how much qualitativity, the percentage of how Krishna does these people possess, like 92%, 100%, 99.5%, 24 karat gold. So like that. So that is Swayam Rupa is the highest, and then from there comes Swayam Prakasha and Vaibhav Prakasha. Next comes Tadekatma, and then Shakti Avesha. So that's how the categorization takes place. Next categorization takes place from the spiritual world. How is it according to the place? Vilasa expansions are spiritual world expansions, and Swamsha expansions are in reference to material world. These Swamsha expansions. Then hands. In terms of hands, there is Prabhava and Vaibhava. So Prabhava are 400 and Vaibhava are 200, basically in terms of pastimes. Then Swamsha is further divided into Sankarshana and incarnations. And once Swamsha in the material world, everybody from spiritual world also visits the material world all the time. So that's why Swamsha also includes all the Vilasa forms. It includes the Prakasha forms. It includes the the Swayam Rupa form, and everything else in between. Everything is there in Swamsha when the Lord comes as in this particular form where he is there in the material world. So in Swamsha, the categorization happens in the form of Purusha avatars, which are meant for creating the universe, and the incarnations which come inside and keep on coming inside the universe for pastimes, for leelas, for maintaining gunas, and pastimes are maintained either in the yugas or they are maintained as per the Manavantara and things like that. So when the Swamsha forms are categorized in this form, Swamsha is actually categorized as incarnation and Sankarshana. I'm just joking. Sankarnation is Sankarshana, and incarnation basically. So Sankarshana is basically when we are seeing Sankarshana, it is about the different Vishnus who are there for creation, and incarnation as different people who come from the spiritual world and descend, and they are categorized into these forms, these many forms like Leela avatars, Guna avatars, and all the avatars. So that's the sum and substance of what I understood, which is maybe wrong also.